What's up guys, Derek, moreplacemore8s.com. Today we're going to be checking out the Olympia final with some of the top place finishes in the open division, classic physique and men's physique, and just kind of give my thoughts on it. A lot of people have been asking for my insight, and you know, I don't really do like the news coverage thing of it, but I thought just giving like an overall recap of my thoughts, you know, how close I was with my predictions and whatnot, and just, you know, how I see things moving forward as far as, you know, the dominating forces in each division and whatnot. So I'm gonna be referring to some other prominent bodybuilding channels who have featured the footage from the event. So main one being Leandro Osti. He has 164,000 subscribers, and he has the open pose down and awards part of the Olympia finals from yesterday. So here we have the top lineup. We have Curry, we have Labrada, we got Ian, we got Bonac, Walker, Big Ramy. And as far as like how everybody finished, like obviously, you know, there's some big talk coming in from Nick Walker to get, you know, a top placement, and some of his, you know, the reinforcement of his statements previously actually led people to think, okay, maybe a top 3 finish is not unrealistic for him. He ultimately ended up getting 5th behind Hunter, which I thought was interesting, because Hunter was seen as kind of like the dark horse finisher in this competition. I think honestly, him and Nick are probably going to be like the kind of like premier young guys battling it out, sort of with, you know, Ian in, you know, close behind them, kind of pushing them for sure in the future. I see Nick Walker as kind of like the brute force fucking house of a fucking human, like literally the mutant. Do I think he should have beat Hunter? You know, I think there's definitely an argument that he should have placed higher for sure. As far as Hunter's placement, you know, I think he is a top 5 guy, like 100%. And I think it's just a matter of time before he starts, you know, grinding out higher placements, as some of the other guys start to kind of like age out of the division. Like we have Big Ramy, I think is like 37 or 38 now, and you have Curry, I think is 38, maybe turning 39-ish this year. I could be wrong, but some of these guys, as they creep closer to 40, Bonac in particular too, like some of these guys are starting to, you know, show signs of age a little bit. You know, obviously Ramy and Curry probably in like the pinnacles of their career right now, but I mean, they have guys who are like a decade younger than them, like Walker, who are like right on their fucking heels. And guys who are structurally very similar. Like here's Walker versus Bonac, and like, to be honest, like Walker is basically like what, like just like a fresher looking Bonac, to be honest, in my opinion. Like some of these guys who are in their late 20s have so much fucking room for just dialing it in, and growth potentially to kind of come in and start, you know, taking out these guys in the top 3 spots. But I think the actual placement of where they put everyone was pretty much in line with what I was expecting, with exception of, I thought Curry might have been, you know, like a 3rd place finisher under Hottie. And there probably is some debate for that. I think Big Ramy as number 1 is kind of undisputable, frankly, unless you wanted to argue that his like quads are like disproportionately bigger than the rest of his body, or he came off slightly worse than last year. So, but like, even if he comes slightly off from last year, does that really like, is that enough to knock him off the top spot? I don't think so. I think he's such a dominating presence that he's going to be, I think he's going to be the one who keeps the top spot for at least a few more years, and it's going to be really fucking hard to take him out. I think it's going to be like a Coleman dominance. I think it's going to be a string of fucking wins. He's a great ambassador for the sport, and it's going to take a lot to take him out. Like he's so positive, uplifting, just such a fucking nice guy. I can't imagine, like somebody's gonna have to do a lot to dethrone him for sure, in my opinion. And I don't think the guys who are, you know, like knocking at the door or whatever the saying is, are like that close to him to really like clearly take him out. So I think he's going to be the dominant 1st place force for a while now. And I think the 2 and 3 spot are going to be pretty interchangeable between guys like Hottie, Curry, and I think the 4th spot, frankly, is going to be like a toss up between Walker, Hunter, you know, maybe, you know, guys like Ian as they start to edge out guys like Bonac as they age out of the show, sort of thing. But I think there are guys who have been unaccounted for too, like Diasha, who obviously could be, you know, top 5 finishers for sure had they been at the event. obviously. So to be honest, I think the placements were pretty like, I don't know, like some people could claim Hottie got fucked because like, look at him, he's fucking diced to the goddamn socks. You know, he does have some suspect, you know, body parts in terms of, you know, SEO potentially, or just irritation, or, you know, pre-show fucking, I don't know, like Nolatil style enhancement, whatever it is. And maybe that, you know, placed him a bit lower than otherwise. Like I know there was a Nicholas Vayoud, I think used to get like down placed because it was like crazy, overly capped shoulder sort of thing. Maybe that's a similar situation. They just like don't like the unnatural look of it, because it definitely is like people notice that shit for sure. So I don't know if that, you know, downplaced him a bit, or if it's just because he's a shorter guy, so he generally just gets a shorter end of the stick because he's not as dominating of a presence on stage. And Curry ultimately is a more like aesthetically pleasing physique, but I think overall, like the placements were not that far off of what, you know, made the most sense to me. And I think Ramy was a definitive winner. And I think it'll probably stay that way. As far as a classic physique goes, you know, I think pretty much as expected. Apparently this is high quality render here. Fucking, we're in 4K and this is what it looks like. Jesus. The first call out and kind of where everyone finished, to be honest, I think made sense. There are individuals I had never even heard of, like this guy who's this young 20s guy who came in 4th place here. Then we had this Brazilian guy, I believe, who came in 5th. You know, some of these, I don't follow this as closely as I used to, but I mean, the top 3 sort of made sense to me. I think Bumstead's pretty fucking hard to take out. I think Rough Diesel is definitely a deserving of that 2nd spot. I always preferred his physique over Breon's, frankly. Breon, I think, is less classic. I think he's more of a, basically like a small bodybuilder rather than a classic guy. He just doesn't have the same, I don't know, flow slash like kind of, it's not like he doesn't have good structure, but it's just like he doesn't look classic to me as much as some of these other guys. So I think Bumstead in 1st was kind of like, you know, undisputed. The guy is, his conditioning's fucking dialed in. And obviously he has the structure and everything to back it up. He has the charisma, he has the fucking, I don't know how much, you know, the political thing plays into it when it comes to who would be a good representative of the sport, but obviously he's up there too, and he's kind of the total package from all angles. But I do think his physique itself, like just unbiased, not factoring in social media following, not factoring in anything, I think definitely is justifiable to take the top spot as well, regardless of the fact that he's, you know, potentially the political best front runner as well. So I think he definitely is solidifying his spot at the top, and it's going to take a lot to take him out of commission, especially when, like, what can Rough Diesel like fucking do? You know what I mean? Like he's like pretty much like the epitome pinnacle of his fucking development, in my opinion. Like I guess you could get bigger, but at this point he's not, I can see the fucking 4K is just like totally glitching out. So I'm going to try and downgrade it. I apologize for that. Clearly my computer is not capable of handling a 4K video. But anyways, the guys in the top spot, like some of these guys on paper, in Instagram photos, in the gym, etc., they might look like guys who could take out Bumstead and they get a lot of hype behind them. Like frankly, this guy in his solo routine, from some angles, looks like, you know, better than Chris, you might think, or that Brian Jones guy, I believe his name was, or even the Steve Lorius, that guy. Like some of those guys get a lot of fucking hype behind them because of the way they look in Instagram pictures and videos, and they look so classic and so amazing, but then they show up to the show and just, not only from like a lack of conditioning aspect for guys like Steve Lorius, guys like Brian Jones, I believe his name was, but even like some of the other guys who do come in condition, when they actually stand like pose for pose, like some of these poses are not necessarily like classic looking poses. Like if you do a fucking front lat spread, like does it look very classic? Like not really, you know, like we have the classic poses, like I would say, are like, you know, the front double bi, you know, the side chest, some of these, you know, like some of the tricep poses and whatnot. But like when you get to some of the things that poke holes in physiques, like fucking back shots, like obviously the back shots are pretty definitive separating characteristics of who has like the most well-rounded physiques overall. And let me see if they do a fucking front lat spread here for me to even show you guys. Now I can't actually find a front lat spread. I just find them kind of like relaxed here sitting, waiting for the next pose. But you know, some of these poses that are mandatory versus not mandatory, like from some of the, you know, like side shots and whatnot that otherwise could show more classic angles for some of these guys versus poke holes in their physique, ultimately are at the detriment of some of them when it comes to the results, I think, is sometimes they'll be forced to do a mandatory pose that otherwise is not as reflective of their like classic, you know, lines and whatnot, or their classic angles that otherwise look more, I don't know, golden era-esque, and they end up hitting a pose that otherwise just exposes their complete lack of a fucking back or something like that. And that's where guys like Chris are just like too well-rounded to otherwise, or at least too well-rounded in those poses specifically to be taken out of commission. Because obviously, you know, Chris criticized for, you know, lack of arms and stuff like that, which is like a pretty, I don't know, in class, like you typically would want to see like big full arms, but ultimately when it comes down to it, he's the most, you know, dialed in from all different fucking mandatories, and also has the extreme aesthetics when it comes to some of these, you know, like front, like the front ab crunch. He has that crazy vacuum, and then he has the ridiculous proportions to go along with it that other guys simply can't hang with when it comes to his quad development, his overwhelming, just kind of like, I forget what you, like this is obvious, like pretty, I don't know, reminiscent of like a Frank Zane pose here, but I mean like you can't, just this fucking torso in general is just like unmatched when it comes to this vacuum, with the simultaneous quads, with the conditioning, with the fucking everything, with the being tall and dominating, and just having the overall sheer structure of a goddamn specimen. Overall, some of these guys I think will have a tough time kind of catching up to Chris, despite the fact that on paper and in certain poses that otherwise may not be mandatory, they might beat him or look more, you know, aesthetically, you know, I don't know, it's optimistic that they would otherwise have a chance when they step on stage, but then they end up just getting exposed, in my opinion, in a lot of the mandatories where you have them actually side by side, and then you're like, oh, this guy who was like really promising on Instagram suddenly doesn't look like they could otherwise, you know, stack up to the champ. Do I think some of these guys have potential to, if they really dial in their conditioning and whatnot? I do, but I think they're gonna have to do a lot because Chris's conditioning is pretty fucking ridiculous. And ultimately in the mandatories, his poses are just like, he has a lot of depth when it comes to not only looking classic, but also looking like he has the most well-rounded physique overall when it comes to hitting the mandatories. And some of these other guys mostly just excel in like a couple poses at most, and or look better on Instagram than they do on stage. And then moving to men's physique, you know, to be honest, this is the kind of thing that I don't even really know what to comment on. Like we see guys like Andre Dieu, obviously one of the favorites going into the competition, or at least, you know, like a highly, probably the most popular guy social media wise when it comes into coming to the competition. But then you have guys that you probably never even heard of edging him out now, despite the fact that last year he was a top finisher. So even though he's made improvements, you know, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, when you step these guys beside each other, it kind of gets thrown up in the air. Like I guess there is consistency to some extent. Like you have Brandon Hendrickson coming in and taking the crown again. So obviously there is some sort of consistency in the judging, but like, are any of these guys beside him looking completely subpar to some degree that would otherwise justify like a clear win for him, in my opinion? Like, obviously I'm not a judge, but no, like to me, like I guess he is like a flex wheeler in board shorts essentially. He's very, very round and he's very well rounded, but I don't really see, like when they turn to the back, for example, it's not like I really see some sort of, you know, like clear separating characteristic that makes him, you know, way better than the rest of the guys. Like when I compare him and Andre from the back, like do I see some like ridiculous detail or like density that otherwise you don't see with some of these other guys? Like, I don't know, not really. From the front, I guess he has like fucking 6 symmetrical abs and he's very round and he's just like very well proportioned overall. But I mean, like some of these other guys, do they not exhibit like pretty much the same fucking thing? I don't know. Like it's like, even when you go down the line, guys who are out of the top 10, it's like when you see them standing there, it's like, wow, like is there, like what kind of differentiating factor really had this guy placed so far out of the top 5, when ultimately it seems like it's just kind of fucking variable every year. Like I don't know like how these guys really judge this fucking show. These guys are getting bigger and bigger to a point where some of them are comparable to classic physique guys, but when they step on stage, like I guess there is a differentiating idea of what the top guy is, the fact that there is consistency in the top winner. But I mean, even some of the guys that have, you know, won in the past and, you know, dropping multiple placings, do they look significantly worse that really justifies them dropping to like 5th, 10th fucking place when they were like winning the Olympia a couple of years ago? I don't know, man. I think guys like Andre like coming in and, you know, doing worse. When did they come in worse, or these guys look significantly better? I don't know. Like, it's just so fucking variable and hard to really tell, especially when you're cutting off half of the judging criteria by having their legs totally covered by board shorts. Like, to me, it just makes it very hard to judge, and I don't really know what to even gather from it. Like, I'm not as big of a fan of the division as I used to be. These guys look fucking sick. They look great, you know, by all means. Do I think the judging was fair for it? I don't know, you know, like at least for the open class, I can say like it was pretty consistent with what, you know, some guys, you know, probably could have been swapped a couple places, but the open class, I guess, was like fairly indicative of what I thought, you know, would result. Classic physique, also a similar story, but with men's physique, I have no fucking idea, dude. Like, I don't, like, could Andre go back to the drawing board, gain more size, come back and like somehow still, you know, be way worse off than this guy from a placings aspect? You know, definitely, I would imagine so. Like, I don't really know like what the fuck these guys are looking for at the end of the day, because some of these physiques are so similar, structure wise, roundness wise, leanness wise, and you're cutting off their legs, so it's like, I don't really know. Like, it's like everyone's just chasing Brandon, and then however close you can get to Brandon is just like the epitome of what is seen as ideal. But it's like, does this guy look worse than Brandon? Like, I don't think so, you know? Like, from the back, does he either? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't really know what these guys have to do to edge out this guy, or what the fucking judging criteria even is. But I guess you guys let me know what you think about men's physique in terms of, was it fair? Do you think the placings made sense? And obviously we want to know what you think on classic, you know, who has the highest potential, who can actually come in and edge out Chris, if anyone. What do you think about some of the guys that had huge hype trains behind them, like Brian Jones? Some of the older guys that had hype trains, like Steve Lorius, you know, can those guys dial it in, you know, take out the, you know, the champ? Personally, you know, there are a lot of people who have been highly speculated about too, like Callum Von Moger, like what if he comes in? Some of those guys, again, I would defer back to my explanation of these guys look good in certain poses, but when it comes to actual mandatories and comparing against Chris in a front double, an ab crunch, or a, you know, a front vacuum, whatever you choose to do, a back double bi, like these guys will get fucking exposed. Like Callum Von Moger will not even be a top 10 guy in my opinion when it comes to him actually getting a pro card and then competing in the IFBB. I don't think he has the structure and overall well-rounded physique to take out some of these guys who are just have too much depth for him. So that's kind of what I think about that. And but ultimately, you know, I defer to you guys too. Like, what do you think about the open too? Who do you think should have rounded out the top 5? Do you think Hunter in the 4th spot made sense? Do you think he should have been placed underneath Nick? What do you think about the top 3? Do you think Hottie got fucked? Or what do you think? All the comments help the algorithm. Much appreciated. That is my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.